Welcome to the Outsmart Burnout podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Zarya Rubin, a functional medicine doctor, an international speaker, and a burnout badass because I've been there myself. After walking away from my own high-stress medical career, I discovered how to break free from burnout to reclaim my passion, purpose, and joy. And now I'm here to help you do the same. From science-backed tips to time-saving hacks, and hopefully some aha moments that just might change your life. So sit back, relax, and let's do this. Welcome to Outsmart Burnout, the podcast where we challenge hustle culture and help high achievers reclaim their passion, purpose, and joy, even in the hardest chapters of life. Today's guest is Dr. Tasha Faruqui, pediatrician, rare disease advocate, mother, and author of the memoir, Keep Your Head Up, a mother's story of chasing joy in the face of grief. As a physician and a mom caring for her medically complex daughter, Dr. Tasha has lived at the intersection of clinical knowledge and raw human experience. In her book and in her life, she unpacks what it really means to navigate anticipatory grief, caregiving burnout, survivor guilt, and the emotional overload that comes with loving someone in the face of unthinkable challenges. In this episode, we will talk about the heavy realities most conversations about burnout skip over. From watching the life you imagined drift away, to the emotional weight parent caregivers carry, to how families can find joy and connection even while grieving. This is a conversation about how hope, loss, love, resilience, and burnout truly intersect. And I am so honored to have Dr. Tasha on our show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for that incredible introduction. I am so glad to be here.
Listen, girl, when I met you a few short months ago at the Physicians Coaching Summit, I knew that I had to have you on this podcast because you are a force of nature and just a shining example of someone managing something really, really, really tough, but doing it with such grace and joy and optimism and hope, but also being really real and raw about it and not sugarcoating anything, which I think is just really rare and really special and amazing. And I think our listeners are going to get so much out of this conversation, and you're going to, change so many lives and heal so many people just by sharing your story with us. So yeah, let's dive in and talk a little bit about, what brought you into medicine, and then how things took kind of a left turn with the birth of your daughter.
So I like to describe it more as twists and turns versus a nice, clean turn. However,
Yeah, there's not just one turn. It's
yes.
yeah.
And I think that is just one of the fallacies that I always thought that, maybe there would be turns, but there wouldn't be twists, and maybe there's only one deviation. But thinking about medicine, I grew up in rural Michigan, and my father was one of two physicians in our very, very small town. So, town of population 6,000, it's actually 6,000 and decreasing. We're down to 5,000 now. But there was only two surgeons in town and a shortage of family physicians. So, my father was both a family physician half the day and a general surgeon the other half. And so, watching him in our community be kind of like a hero. There is just beauty in that. And I definitely looked up to him, but I also saw how hard he worked. And I also saw how my additional four siblings that were ahead of me did not want to go into medicine. They did not want to be on call every other day because call was just split between the other doctor. Whereas I really love the sense of community and how much he knew everybody in our town. I love that wherever we went, they all knew him and they all had scars to prove it. And it was just this like beautiful relationship that really drew me into medicine, thinking that's what medicine was and thinking that this is how everybody practiced. What is really interesting is that I'm actually in pediatrics and I didn't grow up with a pediatrician. My dad was my doctor, and he definitely
Wow.
was not a pediatrician. I mean, I got my immunizations at the health clinic in our county, and I had my dad do my sports physicals. And for every virus, sorry, dad, I got an antibiotic. And somehow I made it through. I have never in my life had a well child visit. I never knew what percentiles I was at, and I still wanted to be a doctor. And so, in thinking about that, I thought I wanted to go into family medicine. I knew that I did not want to become a surgeon due to the call because I thought like everybody is on call like this, and I knew that I couldn't do that. What I wanted more than being a doctor was being a mother. And so while I couldn't envision exactly how that would happen, I knew that was one of my goals in life was to be a mother. And when I thought about that, I was like, I am going to step away from anything surgical. I want something that's conducive to having a family, and family medicine it was. And through my journey in medical school and my rotations, it became clear that peds was more up my alley than even family medicine. And I learned that through a couple of ways. One was my OB rotation, where I would help deliver the baby, and then I would follow the baby, and I would totally forget to deliver the placenta. So that was one hint,
Oh my
and
goodness, that's
my
amazing.
other hint is just doing family medicine rotations, and I had piled in so many knowing that this is what I wanna do. I would scan the schedule, and I would highlight when there was a child, not even realizing that those were the biggest parts of my day, and kind of ignoring the fact that I'd always been a camp counselor, I'd always been a babysitter, and not really putting it together that this is really what I should be doing. And so the calling to peds was kind of more of deduction of all the other fields, not even realizing that that's where it would lead me. And as I found my life partner in medical school, my plan also, by the way, was to not marry a doctor because I was really planning on marrying a house husband or a teacher, because if I had married a teacher, then they could have summers off and then they could help, like, figure everything else out while I worked. So, this
It's
was
so funny.
incredible.
We had very similar goals and
Yes.
plans. I also
Yes.
wanted to go into pediatrics, and I also did not wanna marry a doctor, but I ended up marrying a surgeon, and I did not go into pediatrics because I was too attached to the kids, and it was too much. I couldn't do it. It was a lot of medicine was too much for me in the
Yeah.
end, but not my story, but it's so interesting because yeah, I was a babysitter and a counselor and this and a kindergarten monitor, and I gravitated towards being around kids, and I loved it so much.
Yes. And so in the story of, marrying a surgeon, which also again was not part of my plan, and kind of thinking about, how we're going to do it, then I was like, oh, this is my only challenge, obviously, is like trying to manage both of our careers. There's no way anybody is going through anything harder right now than and he had joined the Navy, and I had
Oh my
joined something
gosh.
called National Health Service Corps, and so we had these government commitments, so I'm like, "This is our love story." Because I always imagine my life with, like, a camera and, like, there's gonna be this happy ending, and the happy ending is going to be after the struggles of residency that we still made it, we are still together, and then we are there, and there is happiness, and happiness is having a family and having your career, and then you have no more struggles. The
Mm.
end. Except once I had my second daughter, I had her the year after my residency completed, and it was pretty soon after her birth I felt like something was off in that she wasn't moving the right side of her body. It was a very normal pregnancy, very normal delivery. But when she wasn't moving the right side of her body, she got whisked to the NICU. And then she was also born SGA, or what we call small for gestational age, which was interesting because my oldest child was not. And so that was like just from my medical background, knowing that that's not typically how it goes.
Mm.
So, when I was breastfeeding her in the hospital, I felt like she fatigued really easily. And I remember asking the pediatrician, one, should I be worried about her being SGA? And two, I feel like she's like extra tired. I was quickly reassured that one, I'm petite, my husband's petite, and therefore petite people can have babies that are SGA. So that was one reassurance I was given. And then the other was, "You've done this before. No, babies are sleepy, especially newborns. It's all fine." And so quickly being like, "Okay, get out of your head." Fast forward to the
Mm,
2-week appointment, and I felt like she was making a weird noise feeding. Brought it up to the pediatrician, and at that time, there is this, like, hierarchy, right? So I am just freshly out of residency, and this pediatrician has been practicing for so long that even though we're both attendings, there is still this rank,
mm,
for lack of a better word. And she is like, "Oh, you must be studying for boards. You know that if I referred you to ENT right now, they would laugh at you and they would laugh at me." So again,
mm,
kind of push that away. Fast
mm,
forward, now we're at the 2-month appointment, and I'm freaking out because she won't take a bottle, and I need to go back to full-time work because I have a government commitment, no option of going part-time, and I'm like, "She's not taking a bottle." Again, I'm told, "You are so good at breastfeeding, your baby will learn how to take a bottle when they're not with you, and they're not gonna starve to death. You will be fine." Okay. Fast forward to the 4-month appointment. Now I've been back at work for a full month, and Soraya, my daughter, is being force fed an ounce in a 10-hour workday. And then I'm nursing her throughout the night to play catch up. And I get to the 4-month appointment, really convincing myself the entire time that all of this is normal. She's going to be fine. And we get there, and she is officially off the chart, or what they call failure to thrive. And now I'm being told, "You're not feeding her enough. You need to give her solid food. Like, if you could just feed her more, this would be better." And at that time, I was like, "Fine, I'm gonna just do what you say." I'm getting out of my head. I'm gonna do it. And that night, I went home, I fed her baby oatmeal, and I took a video. And in that video, she makes this, otherwise known as stridor.
mm,
And while I was a newly graduated resident, I didn't really know what that meant, but I knew it was something bad. And I knew that I wanted to swallow study. I couldn't think of all the differentials, but I literally sent the pediatrician the video and said, "I want a swallow study." And while that was ordered, by the time that it got done with the way things work in medicine was a month later. So at 5 months, we found out that she was aspirating. So now we have a child that's failure to thrive, aspirating, feeding difficulties, and yes, she has low tone. But again, I was told the tone was because I wasn't feeding her enough.
mm,
So there's that in the background. And then we went really from that moment on to a full medical journey odyssey. We went from nobody being concerned to, "Oh my goodness, this child has so many red flags. They probably have spinal muscular atrophy or SMA, and they're going to die by the time they're 1. No, they have a disorder of a neurotransmitter. No, they have adrenoleukodystrophy. They have Zellweger's disease. They have Rett syndrome." And we would go from
like
every
all the worst diseases
all
that
of the
you read about and studied
yes,
in
yes, all of them,
pediatrics. No, we
all of
all
them.
studied, and the
Yes,
things that you just never want to hear.
yes. No, and then you get
Ugh,
shoved to your first
I can't even believe though that I just have to like deep breathe through the story because as a fellow mom, as a fellow physician mom with my daughter has a lot of medical issues, not to this level, but the gaslighting that occurred and that occurs so frequently that mothers are not listened to and are dismissed even when they are physician mothers is just simply unacceptable to me. And I just think that, we need to believe mothers and believe children when they tell their story. And we don't always know better as physicians. And you knew better, but you convinced yourself, well, I must be just overreacting. And but your instincts, you knew something was really wrong, but you
and
were
preach to
dismissed.
what you said, because I truly feel, doctor or not, that caregivers know. They do know. And if
I
they
agree.
don't
I
have
agree.
the language to articulate it or advocate for it, doesn't negate the fact that they still know. And just because they might fumble on not knowing the word does not mean that they're crazy. And I said it because I know
Yep.
how physicians talk, because I am one. So I also can see all of the lenses in how caregivers are perceived, and it was like a curtain went open and I could see that, and so
Ugh, yeah.
that was very eye-opening, um, when that experience happened. And then there's also, like, this painted picture of there's a mother, but then there's also, like, doctor mom, where it was almost like I had a double whammy, like, "Oh, silly new doctor, so it was like they acknowledged that I was a doctor, but it was almost like a negative, right?
Yeah. Like, oh, you're over interpreting, you're over diagnosing because you have too much knowledge.
Exactly, exactly.
The same thing happened to me, and it's exhausting to try to be heard and to try to get your story out and told and to be believed, really, that no, really, there is something wrong. Like, trust me, I know this. My kid knows this. I'm sure if she could have talked, your daughter knew this as well. It's like there is something wrong, and we should be believed and listened to. And it shouldn't be if it's such a struggle for us as physicians, I can only imagine the level of struggle for just a regular person, a mom without the medical knowledge, without the vocabulary, without the means to navigate the system. Like, I can't imagine what that would look like.
1000%. And I think that, when I was in this space, I didn't see it like this at all. I really haven't seen it like this for a long time. And so, looking back, it seems so evident of what was going on and how things were perceived. But when you're in it,
Well, you're
I
in survival mode
yeah,
too.
I
You're
had
trying to
no
survive and you're sleep deprived and
yes. I
you
had
have
no
another
idea.
child. You're back at work. It's just crazy. You're
Right,
in
and
the
I
thick
thought
of
my
it.
child was gonna die at that moment, and in that, when we're, like, going through each test, it's like you're kinda living test result to test result, and with every diagnosis and being like, "Okay, that's not it, that's not it, that's not it," and then we got to, okay, every system of hers impacted, it's probably mitochondrial disease, and then getting insurance to accept the possibility of getting a muscle biopsy, and then traveling to get the muscle biopsy, and then, like, hanging our hopes on, like, that's probably what it is, like, we just wanna know what it is, and then that was inconclusive. And around then is when exome studies were, like, new. So then we had gotten an exome study, waited those 6 months, and then that was not, like, conclusive at all. And
Yeah, and
so
explain to the audience who aren't physicians, like, because
yes,
even it's a little new for me too. What an
yes.
exome study is.
So exome studies, if you think about genetic studies and looking at, I think a lot of people think like, oh, they have a rare disease, it's probably genetic. And I do think that that is a true statement, even for those that are not in medicine. I think that they understand that something happened or occurred either at conception or the way that the genetic material, you know, came out or came to be.
It was copied,
Yes.
and there was a misprint
A
somewhere.
misprint, an error, like, that's
Yeah.
just how it came out and the typing, and so, in looking at genes, there are genes, but at the ends of the genes are these exomes, and so, long time ago in genetics is about 10 years because I'm also have learned from experience that genetic world changes super fast. So, if there's one type of medicine that is hard to keep up with and what is new, it is genetics. So, know that even as a physician, it is hard for me to explain exactly what we tested for, but essentially we're looking at every endpoint of every gene of Soraya's to look for potential disease because at that time that was what we could do. And the majority of errors or typos or rearrangements of genes could be picked up in the exomes. And so that was the idea of why you would even do that study. At that time, we didn't find anything. And so we went from, something's wrong, convincing somebody that something is wrong, thinking she's going to die. Okay, nothing is coming up. And in this time, she is gaining skills. She is going to her therapy. She is eventually walking. She's eventually talking. She's got a G tube, but she's got AFO braces to help her walk. She's still delayed. And we're getting to a point of we've tested for everything and she's okay. And as our geneticist said then, there is no evidence that shows that she is dying. We need to create a life for her that we can plan a different future. And so there we take another turn and I say, okay, I have come to terms that my child has something rare, something non terminal or life limiting, something that we may never know what is. And these are my new path. And we are referred to the NIH. We are referred to the Undiagnosed Disease Network. And I say this because many times I think medicine or not, people are like, what else can you do? Have you tried this? And so even as physicians, we knew that there are limitations, but we went to the highest. We went to all the places and they stored her blood and were constantly analyzing it. And going back to the exome study, every 2 years is what it says a geneticist will say is worth it to retest the exomes because as more people are testing, that's more data that they can compare to, that there's a higher chance. And so the idea is there's 5 people with low tone and feeding issues. While there's no disease for it that we know of, if all those 5 people put in their genes, maybe they all have a typo in the same spot. And then we can call that something. That probably means it's something. And this is how they gather the information of holding this. And so we really kind of lived life in that path for a good 10 years as far as she's alive. We're going to live a long life. Okay, she's not going to go to college. She's going to have an IEP at school. I'm going to learn how to do the IEP thing. I'm going to learn how to educate her peers about what it's like to have a child with a disability. And I'm going to watch her improve, but I know that she will never be fixed, which is a whole grieving process in itself.
Mm.
Not because we don't love Soraya, but no. And I am grieving the child that I thought that I would have. Like that idea never left. It never went away. And so you actually are carrying both. You're grieving this child that never came to fruition, and you're grieving this unknown certainty and this new path while trying to create hope in this future. And so we're chugging along, but this chugging along is still hard because you're managing appointments. You're also working because your dream is to be a doctor. And I will not let anything stop that. And I think there's a part of me in this time that kept trying to jump back onto this track of what normalcy looked like as opposed to just accepting that it will never look normal. And just this is,
That's a really important point. I think it's like
yeah,
that constant battle and struggle that we have against some form of acceptance of like, must make this okay and make this normal, even though it's not.
right.
And that's exhausting to keep, trying so hard. And also to the acceptance of not having an answer. Like,
Yes.
I think that would have made me absolutely crazy. Like, to
And
to be
my
told there is no answer, I would have gone nuts. Like, I applaud you for, like, being able to somehow like, you just have to carry on. You have to live your life and be like, "Okay, we don't have an answer."
And I think that, it's good to point out that as partners in a marriage, we cope differently. And I think that we had very
Yeah.
different perspectives on this. I think I was more readily able to accept gray, where my surgeon husband was definitely not. So he
Yeah.
was, where in the land of, let's say, not being in medicine, you may be Googling all kinds of things. Well, what he was doing was looking up academic articles from all around the world on all these different rare conditions because he was determined to figure out what she had. And so while I say, yes, we were living in, not having a diagnosis, he never
No. Yeah. It's funny because me and my husband were just the opposite. Like, even though he's the surgeon, he would have been the one like, "You just have to accept this." And I would have been like, "No, I refuse." He would have been like, "You don't
yeah.
have a choice. You
I
have to.
think it's a
You must."
even as physicians, it doesn't matter. Like we are still human. It might look a little different, but we are still processing things very differently throughout this time. And for him, we all started therapy in this like acceptance. So it's like, oh, it may be like, oh yeah, we were happy in acceptance. And I'm cutting through the story with some very important parts that we had tools to get us through each day. And for my husband, it was like, you get 25 minutes a night is what his therapist gave him that you can spiral. Like you can do it, but you have to be able to stop. And so
Right.
that was his homework. And really we went along this way until about 2021. And in the midst of COVID, Soraya started getting really fatigued. And that was just a very vague symptom. And, doing telehealth at that time, trying to figure out where is this fatigue coming from, We got her lung imaging, which we went into the hospital for that. But when she was getting her imaging and she was told to take a big breath, that was the first time I noticed there was no chest wall movement. And that was different. And so that prompted a sleep study, which we've had plenty before. And this one in particular did show that she was hypoventilating or her muscles were not moving as well to allow her to effectively ventilate or breathe. That she then got started on a CPAP machine. No, BiPAP machine. I say that I have CPAP. Everybody that needs it, that's okay. But she had started on a BiPAP machine. And so that big shift led us back to the NIH where they were holding our blood, but did a full evaluation with their neuromuscular team. I say neuromuscular because the symptom of her muscles getting weak when it comes to actual breathing led us to a whole nother department that we hadn't had before. And so when we got examined there, it was one of those things we still don't know. And then you're kind of hoping that, okay, she is going to be on her BiPAP just at nighttime. And maybe this will be our new normal. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case, that things from that time have just progressed and declined. And this rare disease that she has mimics that of ALS and thinking of
Mhm.
slowly losing your muscles, your ability to walk, your
Mm.
ability to talk, your ability to eat, your ability to chew. And so now she is on her vent 15 hours a day. We have talked about she's a candidate for getting a trach and she has decided not to. We have open discussions that she knows that her life is limited. And we've gone from, having this plan of like, okay, so she won't go to college to, okay, she's dying. And it's a very open discussion with our
Mm.
children. Soraya has 2 other siblings. Soraya's 13. She has a 16-year-old sibling and a 10-year-old sibling. And this process has been unfortunately teaching me so much. And while I can speak so candidly with everybody, it has not always been the case. The irony is when things got the roughest, when we actually acknowledged that she was dying and we actually told each other that as a family is when we went loud and when we went open with our story, which just wasn't how
Mm.
I planned it.
Wow. I need to take a breath here. And then you decided to write a book about it.
Yes, also not part of the plan, like everything in my life. And so the the plan of the book came out of necessity. It came from a place of loneliness and disconnect. And so throughout this whole story that I'm telling you that is our life, there is the story of not having a community and not having a village. We all talk about the village that we need when you're raising neurotypical kids. You add having a
Yeah.
anything, okay? I'm saying anything. This is not like comparison of who has it worse, but anything
Yeah.
that is not typical. It can be asthma, it can be cystic fibrosis, it can be hearing loss. You name anything that is just one thing that is different that changes your path, it is
Yeah.
isolating.
Yeah.
It is completely
Absolutely.
isolating. The other part that was a little bit extra was not having the diagnosis because there was no community around that. And then with me being a physician, the only patients that I knew were my patients that were going through this. And that is like how do you change that professional relationship? You don't. And then in asking my physicians, can you connect me? There's this thing called HIPAA where nobody is doing that.
Right.
And then, on your podcast, you're talking about physician burnout. So now I'm asking my burned out physician that is so already at capacity, can you do something extra for me? And chances are that's not going to happen. And so in this search, I have called upon our doctors and I'm like, can you find me a book? Can you find me one story that I can relate to? And while they looked and while we looked, I could not find anything about grieving while your child was still alive. And I didn't actually know what that was called. And I knew that I was anticipating her death, but I actually didn't know that there was a term called anticipatory grief.
Mm.
And in that space, I could only find books about children that have already passed or a parent that has like dementia or Alzheimer's where they are slowly declining. And while that was
Mm.
relatable, it still felt different than
Yeah.
this dynamic of parent and child that I was like, you know what? I can either go viral on TikTok or write a book. And my children quickly took me out of the TikTok running and book it was. And To be very clear, the book was not written because I'm an expert in this. The book was written because my story is messy, it is really raw, but if anybody could relate to that, that was my win. It's not a prescriptive book of what you should do because I figured it all out. It is like, "Here's my hot mess, and you are not alone." And that's it, and that is how I wrote the book, and I also, just to be clear, had the blessings and the encouragement of Soraya herself, as well as the siblings and my husband, because it is
Yeah.
very personal. There is so much rawness in it, but in that is where I hope that I can connect with people that are also having some of these very dark thoughts. And again, my thought is if I'm a physician, if I have the privilege of knowing how to navigate the system, knowing where the best resources are, and I am struggling, other parents have got to be struggling as well.
I think it's just so important and so valuable what you've done. The book is called Keep Your Head Up, right? And how did that title come to you? And what does it mean for you and your family?
Yes. So I do think that, it's also really good to be clear with the publishing process because that is also something I did not learn in medicine that, you may come up with a title, but it might get changed a million times. So that is like the pure,
Yep.
honest, like thing. Like I came up with a title, apparently it was already taken. So then like I also, when you do your book proposal, sometimes you're proposing the title before the book is written. And so that is also I was never attached to a single title because as I was writing it, the story was evolving and I didn't actually know would I start the story with Soraya? Would I start with my dreams of who I wanted to be? And as everything kind of was in front of me, then it was with the publishing team was like, okay, does this original title even fit? Maybe not. And so one of the things that was really important to me was music, and it still is important to me is music. And so that's a theme throughout the book. Each chapter is either a song title or a song lyric that has an attachment to a certain part in my life. And Keep Your Head Up is a song title by Andy Grammer, also Tupac, which great respect for Tupac. But specifically, this was more on the lens of Andy Grammer. Andy has had I was such a huge inspiration on our life as a family that I felt very strongly to choose one of his songs as a song title. 1, he is a good human. 2, he preaches kindness. 3, his music carries a lot about joy and grief. He lost his mother at age 25 to cancer, and he sings and talks about it very openly. And it was one of the first artists that I and my family can all agree on, one, that we love the music, but also just who he is as a person that we resonated. And again, in this time where you're not feeling included and you don't have a community, it was the music was our connection. That is actually we're like, he sees us. Like what he's singing about is actually what I feel like that became our community. And he actually came to Cincinnati Children's where we received care and did a fundraising event. And with us being patients, we got to do a meet and greet and was just so gracious with his time with us as we shared with him we're in a hospice now, and we love what you talk about with your mom, and you could just see that he felt seen in that
Wow.
moment. And that night when he did his concert, he brought all 3 girls up on stage to sing with him.
Fun.
And this I can't make up. After the show, when the show is done and we're loading up Soraya in her wheelchair in our mobility van, and we are parked way behind the auditorium of where this took place, Andy comes running outside, gets on the van to look for my husband and I, and says, "I just wanna tell you, you guys are good parents," and gave us a hug. I Who is this man? Who is
It's
this man?
it's beautiful.
So
Wow.
that is just one of the Andy stories. Later, found him, not like we're stalking him, but we do love seeing him in concert, and he is an incredible human. We did a meet and greet with him at a concert about a year later, and he remembered us, and, he dedicated his last song to Soraya. So, those are the connections that we have to him, but really what he stands for. And, yes, so I hope that he got a copy. I tried to send it to him, so I hope that he got it. But regardless, I know that he feels it, and I am just, grateful to have the interactions that we've had with him. There is more stories in the book about Andy that is like the universe brought us together. One is when I'm gonna just admit, but, like, we found out our cat that is, like, sort of a spirit cat has a rare disease. She's okay now, but on the day that she was diagnosed was the day that, I was taking my oldest to his concert, and that was actually the first concert, like, before we
Oh
had
my gosh.
so we went to the concert together and just sobbed the entire time because we were grieving the cat that really in our heart, Soraya. It was like just this weird thing. So that was our first concert. So I've seen him numerous times, but long story. However, the the thought of the title was very thought of, and it was going to be a song.
So, how do you keep your head up, literally, metaphorically, and manage to find any sort of space or time to care for yourself when you're doing so much and you have so much placed on your shoulders? How do you
I
how do
think
you do that?
I think that you mentioned, even the word space. And I'm thinking of, I feel like many people in grief talk about holding space. I just want to be clear. I've never been taught as a physician how to hold space. And while people who are more well versed in the realm of grief and therapy know what this means, I think it's taken me some time to understand exactly what that means, even though the language has been told to me. I truly have had to take time to realize that holding space means you don't fix things and you can't fix them, and I think that has taken me a long time. The biggest litmus for change in my perspective of how to keep your head up and how to hold space and how to keep going is this idea that I don't have to finish something bad before I can feel something good. This is
Mm,
something I carried with me for so long. This idea of delayed gratification has been instilled in me as a training physician.
right, because you put your entire life sort of on layaway, and it's like, well,
Always,
one day I'll be happy. One day
always.
I'll have some freedom. One day I'll be able to do something for myself, and that's life doesn't work that way.
But you better believe that's what I believed because this is how
Mhm.
I was trained. So many times I'm like, this is
Same,
the
same.
universe. Yeah, this is the universe telling me that this is what you're trained for. You suck it up. You suck it up. You suck it up and you wait for it to finish. Once it's complete, then you can be happy. And what had happened was my worst nightmare was my daughter was dying. And that's when I actually realized this will never end. This grief will never end. This love for her will never end. I will never, ever, ever. And that realization to hit rock bottom and then getting kind of pulled onto this Make-A-Wish trip, which just kind of came with the package deal in my mind at that time with being in hospice is like, oh, she's a kid. She's going to get a Make-A-Wish. Great. It's a trip. Wrong. When she chose going to Hawaii and surfing, and I saw her and her sisters get up on the surfboard, I experienced something I could never expect to ever feel, and that was the utmost joy. And it knocked the wind out of me because I didn't think that was possible. Because here I am thinking about this layaway plan that it hit me. Both can be true. I can be so incredibly sad, so incredibly happy at the same time. And at that time, my 10-year-old was 7 or 8, and she said, you know what, mom? Life feels like for us that the lows are like underground, but the highs are on top of a roller coaster. And that really helped solidify what this life from this moment on was going to look like. That we would have both, but not even would. We would actually actively have to, our family motto, suck the joy out of life, that we have to be super intentional about it.
I love that so much. I think that we could all use a dose of that, especially with what is going on in the world and what is going on in our country and what is going on for many of us within our families. Like, we could all benefit from living a little bit more by sucking the joy out of.
Yes. Yes, and between this motto and then honestly, the siblings have really shown me how to do this. I do think that I could be in a different space if Soraya was my only child, in that I do feel like I have to show up in a certain way to still teach and still parent the other 2 children that have a life of their own, a life very separate than Soraya, a life that is different than being Soraya's sister. They're gonna have their own identity, and while this is a part
Yeah.
of their story, this cannot be all of it, and that is truly the motivation for me to share and keep going. I need to show them that there is power in your story. There isn't shame. This doesn't have to be something we tuck away to pretend like everything's okay.
Wow. Okay. Whoo. I don't know that I'm going to make it to the end of this podcast. I promised myself that I would try to keep it together, but
But
your
why?
story is just so powerful.
Why do we try to keep it together? Let's just fall apart
Yeah.
together. Feels
No,
better.
we don't have to. We don't have to. And that's like, that's all what life is. It's this immense grief and this immense joy, and it's all mixed up together and it's all juxtaposed. And gosh, I feel like you've left us with so many lessons and words of wisdom. But is there anything that you wish that every other caregiver could hear, whether they're on this type of journey or whether they're on maybe a slightly different journey, but like you said, they have veered off the path of just having kind of a typical life and your typical child and your story is not turned out how you thought it was. What do you wish that that they knew at the beginning of their journey or that you wish you had known?
I think specifically for the caregivers, it's one, I see you. Two, you're not alone. I think those are the two things that I felt the most. I kept saying to myself, we have to be the only two physicians in the world that have a child that's undiagnosed. That's how I felt. And whether the semantics of that are true or not, the reality is we all, in some capacity, it might look different, have some struggle at some point, and that struggle actually can unite us. It doesn't have to be the same story, but I kept looking for the same scenario. But the themes are universal. And
Yeah.
had I shared even a little bit more, I may have found a community. But because I was so particular about my experience, not even seeing that it could relate to other people, that if anybody is a caregiver, know that there are other caregivers out there that are feeling what you're feeling. And then also not to feel guilty, because I think that's another thing that many caregivers feel that we don't say out loud, just like the
Yeah.
guilt of not doing enough, not advocating enough, not looking hard enough. And it's like I felt like I couldn't, I lost count how many times people have told me, have you tried this? Have you tried this? Have you tried this? But have you thought of this? And it's just like, it makes you feel like you're not trying when you really are. So, one,
Yeah.
also
The answer
see
is
you.
yes.
Yes.
We have
And,
tried all the things, done all the things, and then some. Yeah.
and then the biggest thing that has taken me my longest lesson that I wish somebody would have told me. There is this idea that when we check in, and I think there must be new medical curriculum where they ask about like self care, right? So, this idea of self care, like every now pops in, and honestly, it aggravates me. So, I'm going to just say that. Like when people are like, what are you doing for self care?
Self-care.
I'm sorry. It
Like
annoys
it's
me
an
because,
extra burden on top of
yeah,
all the other shit that
yes.
we're
Like,
doing.
like you doing a yoga class? Are you like getting away to the spa? And I just want to stop that. I want to stop that because I want to say that if you're a caregiver, let's change the language. And if you're a provider or working with any people in general where you're checking in, let's change the language. This is what I would want. Can we please check on our caregivers that they're getting basic needs met?
Yes.
Basic.
Are you
Because
sleeping? Are you eating?
have you peed today?
Yeah.
I'm being so serious right now
Yeah. Yeah.
because I didn't sleep for 3 years minimum. I mean, now she sleeps with a vent and I'm still not sleeping, but like that sleep was like rough. And so if you're not getting basic needs, I want to punch anybody that tells me I need to go to a spa. I know this
Right.
sounds very aggressive, but this is like real raw
No,
feelings that we need to check in on basic needs, meet families there.
absolutely.
And I
And
think
are you breathing? Are you able to find that space to breathe,
to breathe.
to just pause and ground yourself in your own body, in your own mind, in your own feelings, and to feel those, whatever they may be, and to not necessarily like rush through that. And that might feel like a luxury. That might feel like it's not
And
necessary.
that's okay because I do think basic needs are a luxury, and I know that that's messed up.
Yeah.
I get that. But again, if we're talking about burnout, this is
Yeah.
a real burnout and we need to start with basic
Yeah.
needs. So I also feel like making like people always say prioritizing your self-care will help you be a better caregiver. And yes, that's true. But before we can get there, we need to prioritize basic needs. And so I needed to have somebody tell me that so I didn't feel guilty for having somebody watch Soraya so I could sleep. So I could have somebody watch Soraya so I could shower or I could work out. And
Right.
so like I needed those types of things, not like these extravagant things. And I think that that is helpful to just like really normalize the fact that there are probably a lot of people who aren't getting their basic needs met. And let's help each other out with that before we go big, because otherwise it feels like, again, like you're doing something wrong. Like, oh man, if other people are able to like get away to do these things, then I must not be trying hard enough. And again, a lot of this could be my own personal stuff and my personal lens, but by me sharing my personal lens, there might be something that somebody else can relate to. And that's why I share.
Dr. Tasha, thank you so much for coming on the show, for this conversation, for this deep sharing that you have gifted all of us with your story. Man, is there anything else that you would like to leave us with, or how can folks get a copy of your book and all of those good things? Where can they find you and connect with you?
Yes, if you are interested in hearing more about Soraya, the family, how we navigate life, I do have an Instagram account that is the Faruqui, Faruqui 5. And there you'll see a little bit of all of us and follow our journey. I do have a website that is tashafaruqui.com. If you're not on Instagram or if you want to order a book, there's a link on there. You can also purchase the book anywhere where you get books. So Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Books a Million, any place that you get books, you should be able to find it. And I also do want to mention that in the spirit of giving, proceeds of the book go to nonprofit organizations. And currently they're going to Cincinnati Children's and Make-A-Wish. So please know. And when I say currently, there are certain events that I do at different places that may be a sponsor for that organization, but everything is nonprofit.
That is so fabulous. Thank you so much. Everyone should definitely go get a copy of this book. And if this episode resonated with you and you know somebody who might need this message and this story, I think a lot of us do, please share the episode. Give us a like, give us a review. It really does help more people discover the show and discover this really important info that might change people's lives. I certainly hope it will. And as always, remember, burnout is not your destiny. It's your wake up call. Goodness.